Strong Dads wants to thank Quality Auto Mart for joining us as a sponsor. Quality Auto Mart was born in 1985. They are owned and operated by Mark and Nancy Repke. Quality Auto Mart provides all the services, repairs, and maintenance for your vehicle's needs with a 3-year auto parts and labor warranty. They offer complimentary vehicle safety inspection and estimates. Also, they offer a shuttle service, and the 4th oil change is always on them. They are located at 7307 on State Road 46 in Batesville, Indiana. Make sure you give them a call at 812-934-2301.
Welcome to Strong Dads. This is Merle Hutchinson, being joined by Kyle Crawford, bringing you another great show on Strong Dads. What's going on, Kyle?
Not much.
Did you see what's going on in my backyard?
I did. I pulled up today. I'm like, well, he's actually doing it. It's actually happening.
Yeah. After 2 years, we're doing a deck project, and guess who's doing the deck?
Not you.
Not me. That's the best part. You know how hard it was, though, to actually call a contractor in to do this?
Not hard?
There was a lot of pride and ego that I had between I was trying to save money and I've always done everything myself, and now to just go, you know what, it's too big of a project.
But then, you know, when I came in here, like, you know how nice it is to watch
those
guys?
Sitting there drinking my coffee and watching some guys work in the backyard. I'm like, yeah, this is sweet.
Pride's gone. It's out there. Whatever.
I could get used to this. Yeah.
Yep. Anyways, well, you know, I was gonna bring up, you know, speaking of your deck, because you don't have time, you have a new product coming to the market here. We got going on here.
My kettle bar. Yeah, my kettle bar. So
like
kettle bar was the product that I received a patent on back in the spring, and finally got my final prototype in. And it's just as slick as can be. And so now
all fitness, right?
It's all fitness, yeah. And so basically, it's really cool. It's like imagine a kettlebell being married to what we call a landmine in the gym, which essentially it's a joint that the weightlifting bar goes into and allows you to do some different types of activities. Well, I kind of married that concept together and was able to get the patent for that. And so now we're producing. We got our first run is coming. And so when I get those, then we'll actually start we'll have a website and stuff like that where people can see them, and opportunities for people to come in the gym and start to play with them and use them and just see what they're about. So
we've done one show in the gym. I think another show is we're gonna have to do a show on this.
The kettle bar will kick your butt.
Oh,
the finisher allows you to determine how hard you're going to work.
Okay.
Because the table's holding the weight, and so it's just all about whether you want to turn up the intensity or not. Okay. Right. But the kettle bar, you're constantly playing with gravity, and so it's a different game, and so you can definitely ratchet up the intensity of it.
All right.
So,
I like
it. Yeah. So
good deal.
Well,
let's get to today's show. We gotta, you know, all joking aside, we gotta get back into this.
Yeah. Well, instead of strong bodies, you need to talk about some strong marriages. And so last week we talked about the marriage falling apart. We talked about it from the perspective of we said the man having the affair, and the reason why we kind of went after the man having the affair, cheating in the marriage, is because they are the primary perpetrator. Usually, you know, that over 20% of affairs are originated through the man and not through the woman. I think it's closer to about half of that, 13% or so, from the woman. And so, being strong dads, we said, well, let's call it out. Let's call it what it is, not make excuses. Like us men need to get our head out of our rear end on this deal and figure out, whoa, we better do better here.
Yep.
Because if the percentages are as high as 20+%,
and that's just the ones that are actually, you know, claim.
That we find out about, right? And so what about the uncaught? And so the damage is not just to the marriage, but the damage is to the family, to the kids, and to society at large. And that's part of our mission, is to say, hey, man, we need good dads. We need good husbands. If we think that there's going to be a way forward to helping the next generation, it's got to start in the home. So that's why we went after the dads first. But we also I talk to many men as well that are on the receiving end. They're the victims.
Yeah.
They found out that their wife had an affair on them, you know, and so we don't want to push that aside. Like, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And so today's show, we're going to be talking about What do you do if you find out that your wife had an affair? How do you get through that? What steps do you take? How do you heal? What do you do with your kids? And we're going to work through that perspective.
I like it. I think it'll be a good show. I think we'll hopefully kind of tackle some stuff, man. If you guys are out there and if you're kind of like me in the sense of this topic doesn't necessarily hit a chord or hit something, man, statistics would show, and I'm sure with the rock style families that you and Linda do, having the numbers come into your coming into your doors where dealing with stuff like this, there are guys out there who are dealing with stuff. So stick with us as we kind of tackle this tough topic, and the hope is, even if this doesn't necessarily pertain to you, maybe there's something that we say that could help another dad out, another man out there that you can kind of pass along and, share this show to them. So before we get into all that, let's thank our sponsor real quick, and then that'll leave lots of time to kind of tackle this tough topic. So Strong Dads, we want to thank Quality Auto Mart for coming alongside of us, a newer sponsor for us. So thanks so much for Mark and Nancy for supporting us, allowing us to keep putting shows out there. Really do appreciate them. Give them a call at 812-934-2301. They're down there in Batesville, Indiana, so check them out. Let them know how much we really do appreciate them.
All right. Also, we want to thank Casey's Outdoor Solutions for continuing to be a longtime sponsor of the Strong Dads podcast. So for all your landscaping needs or any home decor, go visit Casey outside of Lawrenceburg, Indiana, and just check out what he's got going on, whether it's something you need to decorate the house up or something on the outside with landscape. Casey has got you covered.
Good deal.
All right. So, last week, you had actually brought some of this up, and I wanted to touch back on it because I think sometimes we fly through it and don't realize where we might be. But it's kind of whenever you get shocked by some kind of news, if it's the death of a loved one, it's the loss of a job, it's an affair, it's a disease that you just found out that you have, there are the stages of grief. And the stages, you could say it's the processing of grief.
Yes.
Okay, what do I do with this information? All right. And everyone kind of has a different way of handling these kinds of things. And what happens is if you don't know where you are, you won't understand why your brain and your heart are doing what they're doing.
Yep.
Right. And so the stages of denial and anger and bargaining and depression and acceptance, I need to know where I'm at with these things because I could be making some very crazy, rash decisions, and they seem to make complete sense in the moment.
Yes.
And then 6 months down the road, I'm going, oh my gosh, now I have even more problems.
Yep.
So understanding that when you get shocked by this type of news, that whether you like it or not, your brain and body are thrown in to a very traumatic scene. And you have to learn to process it. So, I'd say right off the beginning here, please do not hesitate to get help. We'll even talk about that in the show here throughout, but don't hesitate to get help because this is where you get a more emotionally disconnected person, somebody who's not feeling your pain, but they can bring more logic in. They can help you reason better. They can be a sounding board versus you just allowing your emotions to run.
Yep. Merle, I'm really glad you threw this into this show because in my training in the medic, part of my training, I did the fire side, but on the other side, we do the paramedic side, and we actually spend a great deal of time in that training talking about the stage of the grief. And I think they're so. I have seen them act out. I have, myself, gone through these stages with whatever is going on in my life. But I think it's really important to understand that these stages are real and people are going through them. And similar to some of the stuff we're going to talk about, it's not necessarily a 1 to 5, A to Z type formula where you're going to go through it in chronological order. Sometimes people jump around, but I think it's important to know that what we talked about last week. If you are the man that cheated on your wife, that your wife has to go through these grieving process. And now, on the flip side of that, if you have been cheated on from your spouse, you're going to go through this process. So I think this idea of denial and anger and bargaining and depression, acceptance, man, you're going to go through it if you've been cheated on, and your spouse is going to go through on it if she's been cheated on as well. So I just think these are really important, kind of pieces to the overall puzzle of this idea of the affair.
Yeah. So, in talking about that, like, last week we talked about, well, what the man has to do if he's the one that was having the affair and he finally realizes, man, this isn't good. Okay.
Yeah.
So we went through the whole idea of how he stops that, and then how he could possibly restore the relationship if it's restorable. And so the same, if you're like wondering, like, well, you need to go back and listen to that show, even if you're on the victim side of things, because the same basic things have to happen, but now your brain works differently because you're on the different end, the receiving end of it. All right.
Yep.
So again, that's important to look at. But I want to talk about from the very get-go, all right? So from the get-go, and again, when we talk about victim, I could be talking to ladies right here, right now. They could be the victim as well, but we're just talking from the man perspective. From the get-go, we are in a discovery time, okay? So maybe you had suspicions, all right? Or maybe there was no suspicion and you just got this big wow notice, okay? But it is the discovery that will create this level of shock and awe, okay? You're blindsided. Even if it is a slow, like you had these suspicions over months and months, there's still this like, oh my gosh, why am I don't even like the idea that I have to be thinking about this, okay? And so we will sometimes resist thinking about it, like, no, my brain's just running on me. And so the discovery process is a big deal. Yeah. Right.
Well, and we've talked a lot about this idea, with keeping emotions out of, trying to make logical decisions. Merle, I don't know about you, but I don't know how possibly you can keep emotions out of something this huge, right, in your life. I mean, what would be some of the things that you would recommend? So you have a man that came in and just went through the discovery process, and obviously emotions are running wild, as I can only imagine that would be the case. What would be some of the things as far as trying to because in order to think logically, emotions have to be kind of set secondary, right? So what are some of the recommendations you would say for that?
So the very first thing we have to do is you have to get the facts first. You have to get the facts first, because your brain will create false realities. There'll be lots of different things that go on. So you have to get the facts. You have to know the people involved. You have to know the places, the times, the locations, the circumstances. You have to get that, all right?
Man, that's got to be hard. That's got to be hard.
Well, so this depends a lot on the willingness of your spouse, whether they're, man, you caught me, okay, and I'm sorry, and I confess, and all these things, or did I catch the person who's going to deny? All right, so it really just depends on how you go about getting those facts. I've worked with people who have hired private detectives.
Really?
Yes, where they've I suspect that this was happening. So a few months ago, I hired a private detective, and that detective went out and got the people, the places, the locations. Okay, because you're trying to base whatever you do off of the best information you have to make the best decisions, right? And so getting the facts is extremely important.
Last week we had talked about this idea, if you were the one that did the cheating, to allow your spouse to ask the questions, and you have to be truthful in giving the details, but only giving the details that your spouse is asking, right? I mean, at some point they're going to say, okay, I don't need to hear anymore, right?
Right.
When the flip side, so we, as the man have been cheated on by our spouse, or again, just like you said earlier, we could be speaking to the ladies just as easy as for the men. What are, man, I've not been in this circumstance. When do you feel, is this just kind of a person by person as far as enough is enough? I don't want to hear anymore. Or is this something that you really encourage guys to find? Because again, we're chasing after the facts. We want to make sure these are hard evidence. We know for sure that this has happened. At what point is enough? Like I've heard too much.
It never is finished in one sitting, one discussion.
Yeah.
Okay. And because what has to happen is when you might sit down with that spouse, the cheating spouse, and you might go, okay, I need to hear it. I need to know what's going on. I want to know, because really what we're really talking about right now is the whole wall of trust that the two of you built together, one trust block at a time, has been blown apart. And so each block is a different aspect, whether it was what I did with money, what I did with time, what I did with people. And so all of those blocks come together. And when I have integrity in the box, in other words, they're in the blocks, that means they're all locked together well. And we have built strong trust in this wall that protects our marriage. Yeah. Okay. And so what happens is when you start to have the very first conversation and you feel you get some names or you get locations or whatever, and you go, okay, that block's blown out.
Yeah.
If I don't get all of the blocks that build trust, if I don't get an understanding or wrap my head around all of them, and some of them I find out later, so in other words, 2 months down the road, I'm walking through the rubble and I see that there's another block with another name on it that we never talked about, but I see it laying in the pile that used to be part of the wall, I will be devastated again.
Yeah.
You didn't tell me everything.
Yeah.
All right. And so the idea of reassembling these blocks into a wall again is impaired greatly.
Yeah.
Right. So I have to get all the information, and you'll know, all right, when you feel like, no, okay, like I know everything I believe I could possibly know or that I need to know. But I will tell you that I've never really seen that all happen in one time. This wears out the perpetrator. If they've decided to come back in, the victim will make them go through many different discussions. And the perpetrator will be like, oh my gosh, like how many times do we have to review this story? And you like it or not, they're going to have to go through it. Yeah. But the victim has to have great security in believing the story, trusting the story, in order to even consider that they would rebuild. Okay, so when is it enough? I don't know. Yeah. All right, that has to be within the victim to say, okay, I think I could start to build back.
Yeah. This next point, this idea of admission of guilt, I would say for sure. I think we probably did it last week in our show. Man, there has to be no excuses when it comes to this, right? So if we're talking to your spouse that has been the one that has done the affair, right? I would imagine if it was a flip side and it was the man that was having the affair, 100%, you have to take full responsibility for your actions. Like, a lot of times we'll talk about, even if you played a small part in that, I don't think there's going to be any justification for someone going outside of the marriage and having an affair. So, again, maybe I'm wrong for thinking that, but I would imagine that, if your spouse is the one that has committed adultery and went outside of the marriage bed and had an affair, man, there's got to be 100% admission that this is on me. I did this, because I think we would tell every man that that's something that they would have to do.
Yeah. So if I find out that my wife cheats on me, then it is my right to demand the authentic admission. It's my right. Like if I don't see it 100% authentic, in other words, if I hear stuff like, okay, yeah, like, I had an affair, but like it was only this one time, and I hear these buts and these becauses and these excuses, then no. All right. In other words, they're trying to still dodge the full responsibility. And so you demand 100% authentic admission of guilt. In other words, they need to fall to their knees. Okay. And if they're not willing to fall to their knees, then that kind of tells you, all right, then I can't go back into building trust walls here. I can't do that. I'm going to have to protect. All right. So, and your partner, like, their patterns usually of how authentic they are. Yeah. And so you do want to be on guard with that. Like, because you can't build back with bad building materials. Yeah. Okay. So you want to get this right.
So you couldn't go build your new deck with old materials.
With old materials. That's why we had to tear the old one down.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So, speak on this next one, Merle. Obviously the business that you and Linda are in with Rock Solid Families, this idea of seeking help. We talked a little bit about it last week. Can you kind of touch on this and speak into this a little bit?
So you've discovered there's an affair. Yeah. Okay. You're out seeking the truth. Okay. You're trying to get to it. you see that there is, whether there's an admission of guilt or not, okay, your next step in this is you need to seek help. And the reason why you need to seek help is not that you're not smart enough, but because you're emotionally tangled to the problem.
I can
all right?
see that. Yep.
Yeah, and so you're stuck in the barbed wire. And from the inside of that, it's so hard to see how you should go. And so you seek help, even if it's, it needs to be an extremely well-trusted friend or a counselor, somebody trained in this, a pastor, a priest. But you seek help because you're looking for a logical, non-attached emotionally mind to help govern and steer you through. And if I will just tell you, like, is it impossible to get through without help? No, nothing's impossible. But the idea of how many times you will step on landmines because you can't see it because you're emotionally blinded by either the hurt or pain or whatever it is. So seek help. And I mean, I just can't emphasize it enough. I mean, that you can call Rock Solid Families, you can call anybody, but get some help here.
Speaking of this idea of seeking help, to me, this kind of goes back to the last point we were talking about, this being, 100% admission. To me, I would feel like those are almost intertwined, because if your spouse, the one that cheated on you, is not willing to go get the help because they think that, they can figure it out themselves, I would imagine, again, not necessarily, I mean, I don't know anything about this world, but I would imagine that that's almost not admitting 100%, like, oh, I can figure this out on my own. I would imagine this idea of seeking help comes right along with this idea of I'm 100%, excuse-free. This is all on me, total ownership. Let's go fix this.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's critical for that reason, for the ownership. So, all right, so we've discovered that this is going on, and now we are getting the facts, and we're looking for the truth, all right? And we've got some admissions of guilt, and we're trying to assess whether this is authentic or not, okay? We're getting some help, but here's something that we have to do. And so all of these things are taking place within the very first, week that we discover all of this. Yeah. Okay, these things are coming together. They're coming out fast. Okay, and so that's another thing that wears you out. Oftentimes people are like, I haven't slept all week. All right, and so the next thing that we really want to be concerned about or thinking about is stabilizing the home front. Right?
Especially if there's kids, right?
Yes, especially if there's kids. We have to stabilize the home front. And so what that means is, I always use the analogy a lot of, if I fractured my leg, that's a wow moment, right? I mean, there's an injury, there's a wound. And so I have to immediately stabilize that by putting a cast around it. And that is to help prevent all the outer forces from pulling on it on different stresses and angles and stuff, which won't allow it to heal right. So stabilizing the home, this oftentimes, all right, depending on the situation, oftentimes this means I want husband and wife separated physically. And the reason is because, that was the person who just blew your house up. Do you think you can really sleep in the same bed, or you think you can be in the same house? I mean, is it impossible? I don't know if it's impossible, but it definitely is going to be an outer force that's not going to allow you guys to create stability. So we oftentimes suggest a physical separation, all right, whether usually the perpetrator is the one that needs to be moving out, okay? But it is all about we have to assess the whole situation. Who's taking care of the kids? How who's taking care of just how things are running? But we stabilize the home front, and we get help wherever we need to, whether we need to get some people to help babysit kids or whatever. That's where we have to put some energy and stability of the home.
Well, in this, will you speak into this a little bit? What will be some of your recommendations? So say there are kids involved. I'm a big believer in consistency with my kids. I want to be, approach my kids the same way, so on and so forth. How would you recommend going about? Because obviously they're going to see a huge change in this, right? They're going to see someone, if the separation is happening. How do we approach our kids? Again, I'm sure everything's age appropriate, but how do we approach our kids and tell them what is going on? But obviously, some details don't necessarily need to be told to our kids. What would be some of your recommendations on that?
Man, this can get so sloppy because of the emotions. But first, like you just said, first off, age appropriate. Okay. Secondly is the people involved are still connected to these kids. All right, that's still their mom.
Yep.
All right, that's still their dad.
Yep.
And so the idea here that many parents, when they're hurt, they want to double down and bring the kids in so that everybody can feel the pain, and then bring on greater guilt to the perpetrator. And so, do not get your kids involved in all this. All right, especially early on. Protect them from all the details. All right, especially young kids, and they're trying to do their own thing. They don't need to know all of the bloody details that you were seeking out early, okay? Yeah. They don't need to know that, all right, because as all you're doing is you're contaminating them, and you're going to make their healing process even harder. So for right now, you protect them, and you put boundaries up, and like, you know what, right now, Mom and I are just having some struggles, and we're trying to work through things. And so, you know what? We both still love you, and we're going to take care of you, and we just need you to just keep being you. You keep working on your schoolwork or your athletics or whatever. You just keep doing you. You let the adults take care of this business.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. You're talking about this idea of putting, setting those, solid boundaries. What about this idea of like expectations? Because just if I were to take out this idea of actually having an affair, this idea of expectations to me, if I were to, plug in work life, it's almost counterintuitive or, counteractive to put high expectations. You're going to achieve something that is unachievable, right? So what are some of the things as far as setting our expectations up in this whole process that you would recommend?
Expectations and boundaries are to be set by the victim.
Okay.
Right? Because they've lost control. That's the feeling they get. They lost control in the marriage, that the marriage went off the rails, and they feel like they've lost control. And so whenever trust is damaged that way, it's the victim that gets to say, well, if there's even a chance, here's what I need to have. If there's even a chance, here's what I need to see and feel and experience. And so the victim sets the boundaries and the expectations. And so maybe the victim says, you know what, like, I can't have you in the house right now. Okay, that's a boundary, right? I can't talk to you about these subjects. All right. I expect that I need you to continue to support the kids or whatever. But the victim gets to play on this. And here's the deal. The perpetrator, this is how we oftentimes can measure their authenticity. If the perpetrator is out there lawyering over, well, I don't like that boundary, or I don't like that expectation, and they're trying to prove their point and protect themselves, even though they were the guilty bird, then you start to get a measurement on how authentic they really are on trying to restore the relationship. Okay. So oftentimes if you try to set those boundaries and you find yourself in this battle back and forth, you are starting to get a picture of whether they are actually going to come around and try to restore. Yeah. Okay.
So that's almost a good way to kind of assess the overall remorse and all this, so kind of speaking to that, so that, you kind of put this in bold, and I think it's really a good point to make, this idea that you can't make someone love you. This is we've talked all the time about this idea of love and how there's actions associated with that. Like, can you kind of talk a little bit about that?
Man. So, if there is no remorse, okay, and we have to separate remorse, because sometimes there's remorse that the whole thing just got messy. I'm sorry that this is all blown up like this, okay? But I'm not actually sorry for wanting to go out and be with this other person, okay? Oh, wait. So, yeah, it's messy, but is it totally messy, right? And so you kind of have to assess, like, well, where's the level of remorse at, right? But then you have to go back to this idea, like, listen, as it pertains to me, does my wife still even want to be in love with me, right? And we know that love is one of the strangest things that God's ever created, because love is 100% based in choice.
Yeah.
You can't have love without choice, right? You can't make someone love you.
Yeah.
And so when you are starting to talk with this person, if there's any chance, you have to see, like, well, are they going to choose to love you, or do you feel like you're trying to pull them into love with you. All right, look what we have, honey. Look what we had together. Like, I love you, and you should love me. Well, listen, if you're trying to pull them back in love, then that's probably not. You don't have a good understanding of what love is. Right? They have to be in love and choose to be in love with you.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Merle, this idea of obviously, if you're the one that's hurt, if you're the man out there and your spouse went outside the marriage bed and cheated and had an affair, man, that forgiveness process has got to be tough. It's got to be tough. Again, just the business that you and Linda, I'm kind of referring to you on a lot of this stuff just because this is stuff that you guys deal with. What does that forgiveness process even look like for guys out there coming into your office?
Well, so let's just say that there's no remorse, okay? Let's say that there's not this authentic guilt admission. There's not solid remorse. There's lots of little strings attached here and there. Then at that point, what we really have to do is we want to seek legal advice. Okay. That may mean hiring an attorney. It may mean talking to somebody who's a mediator, that can help walk you through this process. Okay, and I'm not saying it's going to end in divorce. What I'm saying is you need to start to prepare yourself. Okay.
And this is if there's no remorse, you're saying, right?
Yes, if there's no remorse, there's going to have to be forgiveness, whether there's remorse or not. But there's two different avenues that we're going to go in terms of how we're going to proceed. And so I need to get a little bit of legal counsel, potentially hiring that attorney. And I just need to kind of say, well, okay, listen, we've got all this stuff that we've created. We've got kids, we've got houses, we've got bills, we've got all these things we've created. Like, how do we walk through this? And getting that legal advice creates a sense of stability inside of you. Like, okay, at least now I'm starting to get a vision for what it would look like to move forward. All right. But I want to point out what you just said about the forgiveness. If I go into this part and I see, okay, they're not remorseful, and I work with a vengeful heart, okay? Like, I'm so hurt, I'm so angry at her, like, I just wish the worst on her. She can just burn in hell as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I hear these kinds of things, right?
Sure.
From that level of hurt. What happens is, when you can't start on a forgiveness process, and I'm not trying to minimize like how easy that is, because it's not easy, but it completely wrecks your ability to live with any kind of health in your own spiritual life, in your own physical life, because that forgiveness, lack of forgiveness, creates such hurt and mean and nasty inside of you that it will color everything you do. It'll color how you parent. It'll color how you're going to work. It'll color how you interact with your attorney to see whether you need to screw her out of every dime or whatever it is. And so the forgiveness process is just you starting to go, okay, listen, I can't forget what she did.
Yeah.
But at this point, I can't wish anything bad on her. I want to pray for her. I want to pray that she gets right with God. I want to pray that she finds a level of peace. And now I just need to pray that God would protect me and the kids. And I just want to do things to move on and protect everybody. So I have to get into the forgiveness, because if I'm not, I'm always going into the fight. Yeah. And that's where people get hurt. Yeah. So forgiveness is about getting out of the fight.
Yeah, when you were talking about the vengeance, my mind immediately went to, well, she did this to me, so I'm going to do this to her.
Oh, yeah.
And I can see kind of both of those mindsets coming in, man. I can't imagine how difficult that is. But again, just going through, I say this a lot, that two wrongs don't make a right, right? Just because she hurt you and crushed you, man, I can't imagine that you going and doing the same thing back to her is going to help mend and help that forgiveness process at all.
We see it all the time. We see she has an affair on you, and you get all mad. You go through all these stages of grieving. You kind of think that things are a little bit better, and then because you haven't quite forgiven, then 6 months, a year, 2 years down the road, you somehow give yourself permission to do the same to her.
Yeah.
All right? Because, listen, even if you get caught, you can always say, well, you did it too. All right, well, you're seeking revenge. Yep. Okay, and so, again, we're looking at the restoration of the marriage, but the family. And so we're not doing any good by seeking revenge.
Yeah. Merle, as we kind of move through this, this idea of divorce, we were talking about, especially if there is no remorse, there is no, kind of going through the stages of kind of working through this, and there is no the remorse in the sense of trying to make this better. And kind of making it right and making it whole. Obviously, we talked in the first show. This is going to be a long process. When we kind of talk a little bit about this idea of maybe we've moved to the place where there is no we can't fix this relationship, and we get to the point of the potential for divorce. I know in reading through Scripture what the Bible has talked about and talks about with this idea of divorce. What are some of the biblical grounds, or what are some reasons why divorce is acceptable, as far as, because we are strong dads here, we are faith-based, we want to do right by God, we want to feel like we are doing what is biblically sounded and biblically founded. Can you kind of walk us through some of this idea?
Well, the passage, the scripture that people in the church quickly go to, the grounds for divorce, okay, and one of the grounds for divorce is adultery, okay? So Matthew 5:32 says, "But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality," okay, so except for sexual immorality, "makes her the victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery." So the whole idea that except for immorality, in other words, going outside of the marriage. So if that happens, then you kind of have a ticket for the divorce, okay? But that doesn't mean because adultery happened that we should get divorced. It just because we're looking at a lot of other things like, are they remorseful or not? Yeah. But let's not go there yet. Okay. Right? Let's go with the idea like, you know what? I'm seeing some remorse. Yeah. I'm seeing that they've come. They recognize what they've done. They made some bad choices and so on. So how could we heal that? Okay. Right? What could we do with that? Because, man, I will tell you, we've seen marriages restored from affairs. And if it's done well, you can actually get down the road and you can actually hear couples say, our marriage is better than it ever was. Mostly because what happened, there were things that precipitated the divorce earlier. Right? Okay. Behaviors, lack of communication, trust, not so good, whatever. And so now this thing was all blown up and they had to go back to the base and rebuild. But they, not to use the political phrase of build back better, but they built back better, right? They built back better. Right. And so the idea here is that is possible. Yeah. It is possible. And so to do that, all right, I have authentic remorse. I have admission of guilt. I have a heart that's coming back in. And now I have to start with the forgiveness process, right? Like, okay, listen, my wife I really think she recognizes what she has here and she wants it back. And so I have to personally, as the victim, I have to recognize, okay, I'm going to work on my forgiveness. And I'm going to no longer seek out that revenge. Yeah. And then here comes the next part, okay? Now you have to start to ask the question that I have not asked you to ask yet because I didn't want you to do this. I needed them to own all their bad, okay? I needed them to take all the blame. But remember, I said this is a two-way street. Yeah. And so if I believe that now there's a possibility of restoration, then I have to start to say, okay, I need you to speak real honest with me. What did I have to do with this? How did I contribute to you desiring to go away from our marriage? Yeah. And the reason why we have to do that, and this is...
Man, I bet this is hard.
Oh, well, because this is where, you will hear things like, well, I met this guy at work, and I've had conversations with this guy that you and I have never been able to have. This guy, just gets me. You hear words like soulmate, right? Yeah. This guy's like my soulmate. Like he gets me. Like we have the same interest. We believe that we have the same humor. Like this guy gets me. And around you, I never get that. Oh. All right. So is there something that we can help with better communication skills? Yeah. Getting in touch with each other. Being connected. Because if you just say, well, listen, this is all yours to fix and not mine. Well, you just basically close the door on any restoration because she's going to be like, well, this is a dead-end street. I've been in this for 15 years. I know where this goes, okay? So you have to then start to own your levels of blame, okay?
Yeah. And just to make sure we're clear, just in case you guys didn't catch that, you were speaking, this is after the spouse that cheated took 100% of the blame, no excuses, and there is that initial, we're going through the remorse, and you're going through the forgiveness process, and you're trying to build back that trust. You're saying at that point, that's when, let's figure out what it is that caused that separation, correct?
Yeah. What have I done or not done?
Okay.
Tell me where I've possibly pushed you away.
Yeah.
This is where you have to give them permission.
Yeah.
And again, I mean, I wouldn't do that early on, right? Because I have to know who, admission of guilt. I have to make sure that that's established. But the last thing you want is when we have an affair and right away, the victim says, oh, I know it's because of something I did. I know it's something. And the next thing you know, all the blame shift got put onto the victim.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I would have never had an affair if you would have done this for me.
Okay.
No. The affair is the choice, okay? And so, but if we do feel like there's restoration, then we have to go back into the idea of saying, all right, so what was my part? What can I do better to love you better, to serve you better, all these things, all right?
Yeah. Merle, and you can probably debunk this, but I've heard this saying before, once a cheater, always a cheater.
Man.
I mean, when we're talking about this idea of remorse and this idea of actually going through the forgiveness process, man, when you're speaking about this, to me, I'm thinking of guys saying, well, she cheated on me. She's always going to be a cheater, right? What does that look like as far as, going through that forgiveness process and realizing there is remorse there, from your spouse, if that is the case? Man, how do you kind of debunk that in your mind?
Once a cheater, always a cheater is not necessarily true. Okay, so it has so much more to do with their character, all right? If they were a person of good character, and we always ask the question, are they a person of good intention? And not a perfect person. Nobody's a perfect person, but do they wake up in the morning and they have good intentions for you and for the family and for their life and everything? And so if you have a person who's very selfish, very narcissistic, and they are very driven within to please self, then that would be a person I'd be very cautious about, because that could be once a cheater, always a cheater kind of thing. And you'll see patterns like that. But if you see, like, you know what, this person was always of good intention, but they got off the rails somehow, okay, then it may be worth going in through the restoration process. It may be, but we can't obviously write guarantees about whether somebody would ever cheat again.
Yep.
I think one thing that's important, that if you're going to have restoration, it needs to be 100% intentional. And what I mean by that is you can't just say, well, we're trying to get things back together. That's just too casual. You actually need a program, a system, a plan. And so this is where you might also get with a coach or a counselor and you say, you know what? So we're going to start and we're going to do some daily talks. We're going to start dating again. And we're going to actually have these little milestones that we can see how well we progress through these. And what you're going to see is as you progress through them, you're going to feel either more or less connected based off of how you go through it. All right. And if you go through 3 months of trying to do restoration and you're still having all these doubts and you don't even think about the person, or when you do think about the person that you get still half sick, that's telling you something, right? But if you're going through this and you're like, I'm getting softer towards this person. Like, I feel like I'm enjoying this person again. We're having some fun, we're seeing the value in each other. This is going to give you energy to keep restoring. Yep.
Man, this idea of restoring, I think we would really miss the mark here big time, Merle, if we didn't speak into this idea that, man, in this process, you have to bring Christ along for that ride. You have to. Man, Jesus is all about forgiveness. He is all about restoration. He's all about making things whole. Man, I think what better way, to incorporate Christ into your marriage, into your struggles, than something as significant as this. Man, if there was ever a person who could really be a part of this process and help the restoration, it would have to be Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, he is the the author and the creator of restoration, right? Because we are already divorced from him.
Yes.
That's what sin is.
Yep.
And so the idea that this is a new idea and nobody's experienced is just like you don't get the faith idea. You don't get Christianity.
Yep.
So, yeah, like I want to study the Word. I want to study Scripture and really learn things like forgiveness, grace, mercy, because these are the things that Christ brought to us that are not of our human nature. They are only of God's nature. Yeah. My human nature is, I need to end this and
that's where
blow it apart.
That's where the vengeance comes in.
That's where the vengeance comes in. That's human nature. Yep. And the next level up is, well, no, let's get out of human nature and let's go to God's nature. Well, what would that look like? Well, those are the words of Christ. And that's why we subscribe to the words of Christ, because it is inhuman, or unhuman, I should say.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy. But he then proves to us that when we go through forgiveness and grace and mercy, and we do this well, that we have something better than ever.
Yep. As you kind of move through all this, there's going to be different ways that everyone goes through the healing process. We talked before, I think the stages of grief are for sure a part of that. Merle, touch on a little bit about the idea of unhealthy versus healthy healing, kind of going through this process.
So we talked before last week about people will seek comfort. All right. So if you're in that victim status, you will try to just feel better. Like, I haven't been sleeping. I'm anxious. I'm angry. All these things, and so many people just want to feel better, right? And so there's different ways to feel better. One could be a 6-pack of beer, right? One could be smoking a joint. One could be taking some pills. One could be having sex with somebody we don't even know, right? It could be chasing my work, right? And so we have to understand that these might feel good in the moment, but are they going to be beneficial to long-term health?
Yep.
And if the next thing you know, I now have a drug addiction because I felt good in the moment when I started to use these drugs, now I've compounded the pain and damage. And so healthy healing is important. So we really emphasize the things that they sound so elementary, but this is where I actually want you working out. Yep. I want you eating right. I want you staying away from excessive amounts of alcohol, especially if it's something that you're attracted to. I want you to stay off of porn. I want you to stay away from these things that just are instant feel goods.
Yep, that get you the high dopamine, fixes that your body kind of wants, but you have to be, you have to be the strong man here and realize that that's not going to be beneficial for you.
Yeah, surround yourself with those healthy people.
Yeah.
Okay, surround yourself with good, healthy people. And so this is where, like you just referenced before Christ, like this is where I'm going to start to try to seek some peace in my faith, right? And studying what Christ would do.
Yeah.
Right. And taking care of the mind and making sure I'm only bringing the good stuff in.
Yep.
Taking care of the things that are important to you. Like this is a time, and again, we want to be careful, but this is a great time to feed into your kids, but not let your kids be your pacifier.
Okay. Yeah.
But I want to make sure my kids are being taken care of and just loved well. But don't let your kids be the thing that try to make you feel good and don't let you heal properly.
Yeah. Man, I would say that this would be a great time to, obviously there's that restoration has to happen from both sides. Man, I would say if you're out there and your spouse has cheated on you, man, I would really encourage you to go find an accountability partner. Yes, seeking the professional help, a trusted friend, because your mind, I know my mind would, if God forbid I was ever in a situation like this, I know my mind would run wild. And that idea of vengeance and that idea of finding, gravitating to things that are going to give me that high dopamine fix, man, I would have to have someone in my life to speak truth. To be able to almost take the emotion out of it and speak logically into my life. Like, no, you're not going to go to the bar tonight. You're not going to do X, Y, Z, right? I would imagine that this is going to be something, man, I would just really encourage you to go find that, because I know for me, just in all avenues of my life, my accountability partners are huge for me.
Yeah, because in our mind we have justified anger, right? Like, hey, I am justified to seek revenge or to do these things. And, from a human perspective, that makes total sense.
Yep.
But from a God perspective, he's the only one justified, right? And so trying to work it within his way and try to get settled that in that way it's just a whole different level.
Yep.
Hey, we're going to wrap this whole thing up. no matter, again, we talked about this before, the idea of I don't need to have somebody tell me that having affairs or cheating is sinful. Because all I have to do is experience it, and I know from the level of pain and hurt that it causes that something must be wrong with it.
Yep.
And so if you are involved in something like this, if you are the victim, as the man, if you're the victim, all right, get help. All right, get help sooner rather than later. Don't act like you can muddle through it. The reason why you can't muddle through it is because your brain can't very well think logically, and it will justify and rationalize all kinds of things that create bigger problems. It's kind of the reason why I hired somebody to build my deck, because in my mind I could justify why I would do it, and then I would be angry and bothered and upset over the next 6 months because it wasn't being done fast enough, well enough, all of these different things. And so sometimes you call in the experts, okay?
Yep.
And so this is a perfect time for you to humble yourself and ask for some help. Get the accountability partners.
Yep.
Get involved in your faith. Try to seek out, what would Jesus do in this situation?
Yep, good stuff, man. I know these topics are not necessarily, sometimes they're not fun to listen to. They're not always fun to talk about. But, similar to what we're talking, some of the statistics would show that you guys are out there dealing with it, right? So
all know somebody who is, if you're not.
Exactly. So I think, here at Strong Dads, we're going to tackle some of these hard topics. We're going to continue to keep plugging away and keep, tackling some of these hard topics that you guys are going through, some of the stuff that Merle and I are going through. We're going to continue to talk about it. So thanks so much for sticking with us through this little mini series. Although they're not, they're hard to do, but we're going to continue tackling them.
We're going to do something fun though next week.
Okay, yeah, we got to lighten
Maybe
it up
we'll
a little
sit out on the deck and watch the guys finish up and drink coffee and talk about them. They might come up and join us and nothing will get done.
I like it.
All right, we do want to thank all you guys. Hey, give us a 5-star rating, share these shows, continue to subscribe to the channel. Greatly appreciate all of you. We want to thank our sponsors. Did you thank them already?
I did not.
Okay, so we don't want to forget that. We want to thank Quality Auto Mart and Casey's Outdoor Solutions for coming alongside of Strong Dads and just helping us put these kind of messages out. So thanks to all of you guys.
Yep. Good deal, man. If this topic kind of struck a nerve with you, and you need to seek out and look for that counselor that we were talking about, I know Merle and Linda would love to come alongside of you. Reach out to them, Rock Style Families. They are there for you guys. They're going to use biblical founded principles to help you walk alongside some of these difficult things that are going on in your marriage or your family. So reach out to them.
Go out there and be a strong dad. Casey's is a premier garden center and gift shop located in Lawrenceburg, Indiana. Casey's offers a wide selection of plants, landscaping materials, home and garden decor, and gifts for every occasion. Casey's is committed to providing exceptional service, a unique shopping experience, and value to every customer. Stop in and see what makes Casey's so unique. Located at 21481 State Line Road, Lawrenceburg, Indiana, or call 812-537-3800. Let Casey's help you add beauty to your home.